supplement that main review, which was the key terms and concepts list. Remember that couple page long list of terms that I emailed out even a week before spring break? Okay, so that's in your email inbox. So the way I came up with that review sheet was I basically went through the test and wrote down every single vocab word or concept that those test questions were derived from. Okay, these are for further elaboration and discussion, and also, and of course I could make a multiple choice test of make a multiple choice question of any of these types of questions, right? And then also the extra credit questions that appear at the end of the test always come from one of these worksheets, right? So 2 questions from these worksheets. Okay, those are always short answer questions. Good morning. Do you have all the different worksheets? If not, come on up and see what you got. Otherwise, you can see what I've got here. But we're going to start going over the more so the short answer, fill in the blank, exam 2 review. All right, so we're going to start off with the newest stuff, which is Unit 6 stuff, starting with minerals. So minerals, are they organic or inorganic substances? Right, like organic is like living things. Are minerals living things? No, so they're inorganic. Minerals are inorganic solids that occur. Where do they occur? They occur naturally in what part of the earth? Remember we learned about those 3 different layers of the earth, the core, the mantle, the crust. Where do you think the minerals are to be found? The what? You can't get down to the core. That's hot and molten mess.
It has to be the mantle.
Not the mantle even. That's pretty far down too. It's in the crust. Inorganic solids occur naturally in the Earth's crust. They are characterized from each other by their internal crystalline structure and also their chemical composition. They have a very specific chemical composition. So that's how we actually differentiate between minerals. So minerals are inorganic solids that naturally occur within the Earth's crust. They are characterized by each other by their specific chemical composition and their internal crystalline structure. Okay? And there's 2 different categories of minerals, right? Remember this from the lecture? What are the 2 major categories of minerals? Some of them are good conductors of electricity, right? What do we call those kinds of minerals? Metals, right? So there's metallic minerals or metals. And what's the opposite of metallic? Non-metallic, right? Non-metallic. So like I had mentioned, to prompt this answer, they are good conductors of electricity. Metallic minerals are also what? Are they brittle or are they malleable? Brittle or malleable? They're malleable, right? That means you can mold them and shape them into a desired object, like a pipe or a wire. Okay? And are they shiny or not shiny? They're shiny. And the fancy word for shiny is the word lustrous. Non-metallic minerals are the opposite. They're brittle. They're non-lustrous. And they are poor conductors. Right? So some examples of metallic minerals are what? Copper. Copper, gold, silver, iron, you name it. Non-metallic minerals, some examples of this is like phosphorus, calcium, okay, even salts. All right, so that's minerals. After Igneous rocks are volcanic rocks, okay? So they form when other rocks are exposed to magma or lava, and then they melt, and then they cool and harden and crystallize into this new kind of rock called igneous, okay? So igneous rocks form from the melting, cooling, and crystallization of other rocks after exposure to magma or lava. Do you remember what example we talked about was an example of, what is it? Granite. Yeah. Example of an igneous rock is granite. We also talked about, a couple of units ago, back in Unit 2, that the salt is another igneous rock that makes up the oceanic crust. It's still another example of igneous rock. The granite, the salt, any of those would work as answers. Metamorphic rocks form due to a true chemical change, okay? So you have a real change in the chemical composition of an existing rock, plus a transformation of its crystalline structure, because it actually recrystallizes into this new kind of rock, metamorphic. And the way that that happens is that other rocks are heated and squeezed by pressure over time, takes a long time, causing them to recrystallize. This kind of a rock actually undergoes a big chemical transformation because of that exposure to extreme heat within the earth, as well as being squeezed by intense pressure. Okay? And what was the example of that? Very economic.
Sandstone?
Not sandstone, not yet. That's actually going to be our example for this one. Sedimentary. Marble, yeah. Marble. So granite, when it is exposed to extreme heat and squeezed by pressure within the earth, and then it recrystallizes, it actually transforms into marble. Okay? Both economically valuable rocks, granite and marble. Sedimentary rocks are purely made by a physical or mechanical process. There's no chemical change happening. Okay? With sedimentary rocks, simply loose grains of other rocks are being picked up and carried away by weathering factors. What are some examples of weathering factors? What cause weathering? Moving what? They both start with W.
Wind.
Moving wind and moving water. Yeah. So loose grains of other rocks are picked up by moving wind and water and then carried somewhere else, where then they settle and consolidate and harden over time. Okay, a lot of times this rock has layers visible, right? Just like in the example of what kind of rock? Sandstone. Okay, right? That's what the Grand Canyon is made out of. You can actually see those different layers representing different types of rocks, different minerals from different rocks that have arrived there over time. Okay? Purely a physical, mechanical process, no chemical change. So loose grains of other rocks are carried by wind and water to a new location where they are form from the erosion and deposition of other rocks, right? Because these factors, wind and water, both cause erosion. So sedimentary rocks form from the erosion and deposition of other rocks. Okay? And so let me put our example back up there, example sandstone. But also, we did discuss that limestone is also an example of a sedimentary rock. Okay? Just want to make sure that this doesn't all get mixed together. Good morning, Jen. You got the worksheets, right? You got the worksheets? Yeah, okay, perfect. All right, I will leave that up there for you so that you can write that stuff down. Okay. So next we're going to talk about mining. Okay, so I'm just going to try to make some room here to keep this up here for a little bit. So we're going to talk about surface mining first. And we'll talk about the methods and the impacts. Do you guys remember the two major methods of surface mining? What two kinds of mining occur at the surface? Any idea? One of them involves mountaintop removal, so basically blowing the top off a mountain, revealing an open pit beneath. Okay? So one of the methods of surface mining is open pit mining. And then the other method involves removing layers of for the mining process, layer by layer. So vegetation goes first, and then goes the soil, and then goes layer by layer of rock until you get to your desired mineral beneath. So that's called strip mining. Right? Slowly removing strip by strip. Okay. Environmental impacts of this. What do you guys think? What are some environmental impacts of open pit or strip mining? And there's a lot of different impacts. Okay. First of all, what's happening to the land? Right? There's some major landscape transformations going on there, right? So you're going to have habitat loss, right? Yeah, habitat loss. Deforestation is really synonymous with habitat loss, but that's an important thing to mention. Okay? What else, though? Runoff. What is it? Runoff. Runoff, yeah, definitely. Runoff. Runoff of really polluted water. Okay? So runoff from the mine that can then contaminate streams and rivers and lakes and ponds. What is that really nasty runoff from a mine called? There's a special name. You guys know? Do you remember acid mine drainage? Does that sound familiar? So acid mine drainage. Don't forget about that. I guarantee you'll have a question about that on your test. Acid mine drainage. How about water use, water consumption, right? Water is used to cool the machinery that works in the that is at the mine. Plus, it's also used for washing and rinsing away soil and mineral debris and all that kind of stuff. So you have a lot of water use. Okay. There's a lot of different things you can say there. Try to think about it. What would be the impact of removing all these layers? You're also going to have more soil erosion around the mine. Okay? So if you're clearing away that vegetation and opening up this area of the land, what else is going to happen? Well, moving wind and water is going to pick up more soil that's in that area and carry it away somewhere else. Okay, a lot of different impacts. So surface mining is a really nasty, dirty process. Okay. Jenny, you've got this down, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so now we're talking about subsurface mining. Subsurface mining is really just kind of a different way of saying underground mining. Subsurface or underground mining. And shaft line, or if you want to go over top, right? The top of the mountain, you call that a slope line. Shaft or slope. This is not as environmentally destructive, okay? You are going to have some water use. You can have some land disturbance, but you're not going to have just like complete habitat loss. But where are the impacts mostly? Where are the hazards mostly if it's not mostly to the environment? Who's got to work in these things? Who's got to work when we're underground in a shaft or a slope under a mountain, right? The workers, right? So this is very dangerous for human workers because mines collapse, also, and they can get buried in there, trapped. Also, they are breathing in a lot of dust and particles, which can get lodged in their lungs over time and eventually can cause cancers. Okay, so no matter what, it's a very hazardous process for the human workers. Okay, this is a more expensive process than this. Okay, so this does tend to happen more often nowadays, surface mining, because it's cheaper, it's less hazardous to the humans, but it is more environmentally destructive. You know, it's kind of like a pick your poison kind of thing. And if you have to pick your poison, most would choose, well, let's do the thing that's less dangerous for the humans, of course, right? Okay. All right, so question number 4 is just a simple fill in the blank answer. So what is this term, vocab term? This is a refining process that is used to separate impurities from the desired mineral. Desired metal. What's that process called? Starts with an S. Anybody know? No?
Smelting.
Yeah, there you go. Smelting. Don't be shy. Smelting. Smelting is that process used to separate out the impurities from that resource that is desired. Okay, so now question number 5 is more of a critical thinking question. There was certainly not like a single slide that said these are the different environmental impacts of conventional agricultural practices. This is something that basically you're building on from previous units and also applying from these units. Okay, so let's talk about them. What are some environmental impacts of typical industrialized agricultural practices? Think about it.
Water.
Use of water.
Yeah, water use, right? You guys learned way back in Unit 3 that agriculture, as conventionally done, is the biggest user and consumer of water by far, much more than industry, much more than domestic use. Okay, so agriculture definitely uses a lot of water. What else? What did you learn about from Unit 6, right? Did you learn about how soil is in trouble, right? Soil fertility around the world. Remember that statistic that only 11% of the world's soil is actually suitable for agriculture? Okay, now and in the future. Well, why is that? It's because typical industrialized agricultural practices have exhausted the soil. Okay, so you have loss of soil fertility. You also have soil erosion because instead of growing crops in areas where there's still some natural vegetation, we usually just clear that away. Well, if you clear away that vegetation, then there's really nothing there to hold the soil in place. So the soil gets picked up by wind and water and carried away. Okay. What else do we do in farms? Do we add some stuff to the ground? Fertilizer and what else? So there's fertilizer use and runoff, right? Fertilizer use, which is excess nutrients, and then that can lead to eutrophication. But another source of pollution is also what? What do we put on farmland to kill bugs? Pesticides, right? Pesticide use. So if you thought about it for a moment, you could really come up with a really long list of different environmental impacts of typical agriculture. Does that make sense, guys? So with that kind of a question, like really try to apply what you've learned, and even just common sense. Think about it. Farms. What happens on a farm? We use a lot of water. We exhaust the soil. We pour fertilizers on it. We pour pesticides on it. Okay, all these different things. But we luckily have methods that are now good for soil conservation, more sustainable farming methods. So that gives us question number 6 here. 3 agricultural methods for soil conservation. We went over like 6 on that last slide from Unit 6. Okay? But I'm just asking for 3 right here. So let's hear them. You guys remember any of those? Crop rotation.
Terracing.
And terracing. Okay. Crop rotation, terracing.
Strip cropping.
What else?
Strip cropping.
Strip cropping. Yeah. Okay. So that's 3 of them. There was more, right? But I only asked for 3. But so remember, there's shelter belts, there's no-till agriculture, contour plowing. Okay, don't forget about those as well. Now, if this was an extra credit question on your test, and I just said list them, that's all you would have to do. But the question says describe. So you not only have to list them, but then also describe them slightly, right? So what does crop rotation entail? Do you plant like the same crop every single year? No, you change it up, you rotate it, right? So you plant a series of crops over the years. So like you can grow corn for 1 or 2 years, and then grow soybeans for 1 or 2 years, and then grow wheat for 1 or 2 years. And then you can go back to corn and then soybeans and wheat. And you just kind of change it up every couple of years, change up what you're growing. That helps to keep a diversity of soil nutrients. Doesn't over-exhaust the soil as much as planting just corn for decades at an end. Okay. What is terracing? Terracing involves doing what to the land? Remember that? You're making a bunch of different levels and shelves, right? So you use it on steep mountainsides or hillsides, okay? So cutting shelves or levels into a hillside or a mountainside. And then you plant your crops on those shelves, on those different levels. They kind of look like big steps, right? It kind of looks like a big staircase. And then when it rains, any soil that would get picked up from one shelf would probably only fall down maybe 1 or 2 levels, then get caught on the next. So it slows down the movement of soil, okay? So you're not losing soil as fast as you would if it just was a big steep mountainside that rained and then the soil's poured down the side of the mountain. Okay. Cutting shelves or levels into the hillside slows down the movement of soil, maintaining fertility. And then strip cropping is doing what? How many different? Planting different crops at the same time, right? So you'll have strips of different crops. So like you go, one strip could be corn, and the other strip could be wheat. And then you kind of just have them alternating in different rows. Corn, wheat, corn, wheat, corn, wheat. So at the same time, different crops. Okay? Planting different crops and alternating rows at the same time. because it can enable a farmer to have 2 separate harvests a year. Maybe one of those crops can be harvested in the fall, like most crops, but then maybe the other crop could be harvested in the springtime, you know? So then the farmer makes more money by doing that as well. Instead of all the money being tied up to one time of the year, you can have 2 different times to make a profit.
Well, they're not one that you plant trees around the farm.
That's shelter belts.
Um,
Shelter belts is planting, having trees planted surrounding the farm, slowing down the movement of wind and water and capturing the soil within. Shelter belts. A belt of trees providing shelter for the farm, right, from the soil. Okay, so now we're on to the back of that first page, number 7. What is soil? So soil is found in the uppermost layer of the Earth's crust, right? But what are its 4 main ingredients? What is soil made out of? It's a heterogeneous mixture. It's not just like one thing. It's 4 different things that all come together to make soil. Do you guys remember what's the main component of soil?
Oh, that's not.
What is it?
Would it be organic matter or minerals?
Yeah, well, both of those are 2 ingredients. Okay, so the main component of soil is the mineral particles, providing nutrients and anchorage in the soil. And then there is organic matter. Organic matter can be living organisms like insects, or it can be dead stuff, dead plants and dead animals, right, that are decomposing in the soil, being a source of natural fertilizer and nutrients. Okay? Do you remember what the term for like the dead organic matter is, the dead decomposing matter is? It starts with an H. Remember that humus word? Humus, not hummus, but humus. Okay, humus. That's a sign of good fertile soil. The dead decomposing organic matter. Nice humus. Okay. And what else? Other than these 2 things, what else are you going to have in the soil? You got to have pockets of what? Air, yeah. And then what else do you have to have for the plants and the living things in the soil?
Water.
Water. Air and water. Perfect. Okay, so that's it for the Unit 6 concepts that we're going to be going over. Now, we're kind of going backwards. Now we're going to go into Unit 5 stuff, Florida ecosystems. So, benefits of mangrove ecosystems. You guys remember that? What are some benefits of mangrove ecosystems? Land builders, that's a good one, right? The roots of mangrove trees help to capture moving sediments, help to reduce erosion and build up the coastline. Okay, what else? How about a habitat, right? A unique habitat, an ecosystem that some organisms spend their entire life living in or around the mangrove trees. And then what else? Some organisms use this as their sort of breeding and nursery grounds, right? Little baby fish and little crustaceans kind of hang out around the roots of the mangrove where they can be safe and protected from getting eaten by bigger predators. Okay? So nursery grounds. Okay, number 9, very important question, something that you're going to even have to know for the next exam, exam 3, as it relates to our oceans unit. So, rising ocean temperatures are correlated bleaching. And that happens when the corals expel what? Expel what? A very important symbiotic organism that lives within their tissues. It's a big word. It starts with Z. Zooxanthellae. Good. Zooxanthellae. Okay, you might as well learn this now. You need to know it for this test, and you need to know it for the next one. Don't forget it. Okay. So the next question is, what is the difference between a swamp and a marsh? So swamps and marshes are both interior wetlands that are characterized by fresh water, right? That's what's similar about them, both interior wetlands. But they are very different because they're dominated by different kinds of plants. Okay? Swamps have what that marshes do not?
Trees.
Swamps have trees. Simple as that. Swamps are dominated by trees. Do you remember what the most dominant kind of tree in our swamps here in Florida are? Starts with C. Cypress. Yeah, cypress trees. And in fact, the biggest closest preserved land that is swampland is called the Big Cypress National Preserve. That's just to the west of the Everglades. Okay? It's 700,000 acres of wilderness that is open to the public, and you guys can go explore if you want. I spent enough time there when I was in grad school doing my research on fox squirrels.
Last time I was in Loxahatchee.
Loxahatchee. Okay, and they've got pockets of cypress swamp too, definitely. They've got all sorts of stuff there. They got pine flatwoods, they got cypress swamp, they've got marsh, they got all there. And a lot of different areas of Florida, you have a lot of different habitats all very close to each other. Yeah. So marshes, though, are dominated by what kind of plants? No trees, but what kind of plants dominate a marsh? They're called non-woody. Non-woody, which woody means like it has bark, like trees have bark, right? Dominated by non-woody plants. So non-woody plants are green and fleshy, all the way down towards the root system. There's no bark. And what's the dominant kind of a plant in the marshes in the Everglades, right? What's everything around here named after? What's that mall and that highway named? Come on, guys. What? There's that highway that kind of goes like an L shape, goes out west and then hangs all the way at the perimeter of our. And there's that big mall down there by Sunrise, all the way at the end. Right near
Sawgrass.
Sawgrass.
Oh my God.
Listen, you gotta understand why things are named what they are, right?
It's dolphin one.
They're named after the,
It's good.
plants and stuff, right? How many things in our community are named cypress, this or that? How many things are named sawgrass, this or that? Well, it's interesting to know why, right? Our marshes are dominated by sawgrass, which is a non-woody plant.
I thought it was someone else one day. And when I first found it, just the name of someone.
No, that's not the plant. Well, now you can tell your friends and family what all these things are named from, right? Show off how smart you are. Okay, what's the next question? Estuary questions. All right, so number 11, what is an estuary? So estuaries have what kind of water? Brackish water. What does that mean? Brackish water is a mixture of what? Salt and fresh. Everybody knew that, okay? All right, so estuaries where you're going to have an estuary environment, because of the mixture of the salt and fresh water. Okay? And you're going to have special ecosystems found in those areas. So what are those ecosystems? We've already talked a little bit about one of them. Okay? What about these? These benefits were from what type of ecosystem? They're found in estuaries, right? Mangroves. So mangroves are found in estuaries. And what else? You guys remember? We didn't talk about it yet, but we talked about it in the lecture. They're found on low energy coastlines, so most of them are along the Gulf of Mexico here in Florida. They're the world's most endangered ecosystem. Remember that? Salt marshes. Does that ring a bell? Okay. So mangroves and salt marshes are both special ecosystems found in estuaries. Letter C, what factors may cause variation in salinity in an estuary? So this is another more so critical thinking type question. Okay, there's certainly, I didn't have that on a slide specifically. So what can you think? And really what I'm looking for here, guys, is a human-caused variation in salinity and a natural cause of variations of salinity. Okay, what do you think? So what's going to influence how much water, how much fresh water runs off of the land and then into the ocean? Okay, let's talk about the human things first, right? What human constructions can get in the way of the natural flow of water to where it should be going, right? Remember when we talked about the Everglades? Mm-hmm. Okay? And did anybody go watch that Everglades video here, by the way?
Yeah.
Not yet? Okay, you're here. Maybe you can do it after this session. How about canals and roads? Okay, this will help you, that video will help you understand this so much better. So, human constructions like canals and roads. We built so many canals to drain water out of Lake Okeechobee, east and west, to then drain water out of the Everglades. All these different canals and waterways that we have in our community, and giving Fort Lauderdale that nickname, the Venice of Florida, is because of all these canals that are draining water out of the Everglades. Well, the water that's in the Everglades, okay, ultimately starts off at the Kissimmee River, flows through Lake Okeechobee, and then south through the Everglades, and it should be going this way south into the Florida Bay, which is an estuary. Okay? But instead, we are draining the water this way, that way, and all throughout our landscape, we are draining that water. Okay? So less water is getting into the Florida Bay than it should. Okay? So and then roads, think about that. So Alligator Alley, right? Tamiami Trail, directly right in the way of that movement of water. Okay? All of those human constructions are altering the normal flow of water. Okay? And that harms the estuaries that are found here. Okay? So human constructions like roads and canals. So if you have less water getting here, then you're going to have higher salinity than you should, right? Okay? So what about the natural phenomena? In Florida, we don't actually have 4 seasons, right? We don't actually have, fall and spring and summer and winter. We really only have 2 seasons. And we're going to talk about this more in Unit 7. But we have wet and dry. Those are our seasons, right? Like right now it's the dry season. How long has it been since it's rained? Wait some time. Okay, many, many weeks. And it's going to be like that for the next couple of months. Okay? So during the dry season, like now, what's happening with the salinity in the estuary? Is it going up or going down? It's going up, right? Because if it's not raining as much, then there's less fresh water going here. So the salinity gets higher. But then during the summer months, when it rains every day for hours and stuff like that, then there's a lot of rain going off the way into the estuary, then your salinity is lower. you have seasonal fluctuations. That's a natural thing. Organisms in Florida are adapted to these natural seasonal fluctuations. They're not adapted to these human constructions like canals and roads. Okay, so the next couple of questions refers to the Everglades, problems and issues. And so I'm really hoping that you guys do take the time to watch that movie. And I think that even if, a couple of you want to do it right now after the unit, you can just go and watch it together even. So we'll wait for each person to be done.
By the way, we're going to watch it here on the library.
Yes, you'd have to watch it here on one of the computers. I think that they even have a special room for you to do that in, but otherwise you would just do it on the computer. Okay. All right, so these next questions, and these are also 3 of the same questions that are on that worksheet that I had sent you that's based on the video comprehension. So 12A, what are the source headwaters of the Everglades? Well, I basically already mentioned it, right? What's this river? Remember what this river is called? This is the headwaters of the Everglades right here. The Kissimmee. The Kissimmee River. Is the headwaters. How have humans impacted the Everglades? We already talked about one of them, right? What is all this going on?
They made the canal.
They made the canals and the roads, right? We altered the natural hydrologic flow. Hydrologic is just a fancy way of saying water. Okay? We altered the natural flow of water or the natural hydrologic flow by building canals and roads. All of this draining of the water out of the Everglades and from the Lake Okeechobee, that reduced the size of the Everglades by half. It would be twice as big as it is now if it wasn't for all of that construction draining out that water.
Lake Okeechobee is still north from here, right?
Oh yeah, Lake Okeechobee, it's what joins the Kissimmee River to the Everglades watershed.
And what do we see?
It's Lake Okeechobee is like kind of like west of like Palm Beach. What was the next question? I thought you said something, no? Let me think about it, let me know. Okay. So this is one of the major problems, is that we've reduced the amount of water. Right? There's less water getting into the Everglades now than there should be because of all this draining. Okay, we altered the natural flow of water. And then what's the other thing? Okay, so the Kissimmee River we actually transformed into a straight canal also. And then we planted farms on all sides of it. We grow a lot of sugarcane right here at the southern end of Lake Okeechobee. We live in this area and we produce a lot of stuff that then runs off into the water in the Everglades. So what's another problem in the Everglades, guys? What's coming off, what's running off of the farms, what's running off of our backyards and our streets and all that? What's all that stuff called? It starts with a big P, right? Pollution. Pollution. We're polluting the water. Okay? And then so we've got water pollution from runoff. Right? Runoff from farms. Runoff from our communities. So these are the 2 big problems. There's less water getting into the Everglades than there should be, and it's polluted. Okay? Still, so that video is awesome to be able to see that kind of stuff. Okay? So that's the answer to 12B. And now what about 12C? What's being done to restore the Everglades ecosystem? So what's being done to fix this problem? Okay. What is it? Backfilling canals. So some of these canals are actually being filled in, okay? So to fix this problem, we are backfilling canals and repairing waterways.
What do they fill the canal with?
Like sand and dirt.
Just a bit cold.
They just fill it in, and then once they fill in the canal, so let's say that they fill in this one, then the water just starts to take its normal course south, like it should, okay? The Kissimmee River, like I mentioned before, had been transformed into a canal, a straight canal. And so they filled in a portion of it, and so then it took back its nice winding, slow course again.
The reason why they start doing this is not like to drain the flow or something happens in the back.
That's right, there was a big hurricane, and that caused a whole bunch of water to flow out of Lake Wachowee, and 3,000 people had died back in the early 20th century. So that was the real reason why they declared a war on water, and they drained all this water.
I have a question. Somebody I heard about that. One of those canals, I could say, Florida from the intercoastal. Is that like one of the reasons they built that kind of for tourism and but
Sure.
yes, someone said just in case of like a tsunami, like a flow from the ocean, kind of like
Disperse it. We're not really at a huge tsunami risk here because the coral reefs protect us. The coral reefs surrounding the state of Florida, like a lot of times coral reefs can be called barrier reefs, and they are barriers to that kind of storms, like that kind of rush of water. So and the closest plate tectonic line is in like the Caribbean, near Haiti, right? But even if a tsunami was triggered there, it would get broken up by all the coral reefs. So we are pretty safe from tsunami. We don't have a huge tsunami risk because of coral reefs. Okay, so backfilling canals and repairing waterways is how we're fixing this problem, right? And what are we doing to fix this water pollution problem? There's a special vocab term that you guys do need to know. It's a process where you use native plants to absorb the excess nutrients, like the excess phosphorus that's running off of the land into the water. It's called bioremediation. Bioremediation. Using native plants in buffer zones, and constructed wetlands to absorb excess phosphorus. Okay? So like for example, this is like the area where, our Tri-County area, for example, eventually ends at the line of the Everglades, right? And so in all these different areas, like just south of where we grow sugar cane, and also in different little zones all around here, we've got these constructed wetlands or stormwater treatment areas where the water that would run off of our, polluted urban areas, right, has to pass through these special zones where we have native plants there that are there on purpose to suck up extra nutrients. And that way, when that water passes through those zones into the Everglades, it's much cleaner as a result from that. Okay?
So do they use the native plants because those plants are used to the phosphorus?
Yeah, well, they're good at, they use a diversity of plants, and this is the video goes into this more as well, okay? It's a really good video, it's entertaining, it's only an hour long, you guys should watch it. Cattails are something that really loves phosphorus, and so, they use it to stimulate their growth, and so the cattails it passes through first, and then there's like submerged aquatics, and then there's cattails, not cactus, cattails. It's this kind of plant. And then there's also these blankets of in their tissues. All right? So these are the two main methods to restore it. Repairing the waterways so that the water flows like it should south, more so than it has because of all those things we built. Another thing that we do is we raise roads. A lot of the construction that happens on Alligator Alley is to actually lift it up in portions so that the water can have a path to go south. So it's not just totally blocked by that road. Okay? All right, what's next here? Okay, next short, easy question here. Number 13, fire is an important part of which Florida ecosystems? You guys remember any? Scrub, definitely, right? Remember that example with the gopher tortoise digging its burrows? What else? What else needs to burn regularly? Otherwise, the fire will eventually cross into the crown of the trees and then cross from tree to tree to tree. Remember that? The pine trees? Where are pine trees dominant? And what kind of Florida ecosystem? You guys remember pine? Flatwoods. And then another one is like pretty much the prairie lands of Florida. They're grasslands specifically. They are home to species like sandhill cranes and grasshopper sparrows. And that's called sandhills. So these are the three fire-dependent upland ecosystems in Florida: scrub, pine flatwoods, and sandhills. Okay. And at that point, we are done going over Florida ecosystems concepts. Now we're just going to spend the rest of our time talking about huge Unit 4. Remember, Unit 4, regular ecosystems, is a massive unit. So we'll go through the rest of this worksheet as well as these other two supplemental worksheets as well. Okay? So the first question is to differentiate between a population, a community, and an ecosystem. Okay. So a population. Populations are characterized by all the individuals of what? A single species. That's the key. Okay? All individuals of a single species that live at the same place at the same time, right? So, example of this, all of the raccoons in Coconut Creek. That's your population. Okay? All the individuals of a single species that live at the same place at the same time. The community is going to be what? Different species, that's right. So all the populations of different species that live at the same place at the same time. So this can be all the raccoons in Coconut Creek, all of the gray squirrels, all of the pine trees, okay, all of the oak trees, all of the mockingbirds, all of the humans, right? All of those living things of different species would make up the community. Does that make sense? And then an ecosystem is made up of what? Much more broad. What?
The interaction
Between what? All living and non-living things. So all the living things, all the different communities, as well as the non-living factors. Okay, all living and non-living things that interact in the same place at the same time. Okay. So now building on that takes us to number 15, differentiating between biotic and abiotic factors. Okay? So biotic is a fancy way of saying what? Living things, right? So biotic factors are living things. So what are some examples of living things? Animals. What else? Plants. Yeah. How about microscopic organisms that can be found in the soil, for example? Bacteria. How about fungus, right? Fungi. All those things are living things that are important in an ecosystem. And then abiotic factors are what? Non-living things. So what are some examples of non-living things?
Water.
What?
Water.
Water.
Mineral.
Yeah. Water, minerals, rocks,
Oxygen.
oxygen. Yeah, that's good. Oxygen and carbon dioxide. What was that with a T? Temperature, right? Which is influenced by the energy from the sun. Perfect. Very good. Okay, you guys have that down. Okay, so now we're going to get into a couple food chain questions here. So you got to tell me what kind of a producer or consumer these things are by following the food chain. So a bear that eats a fish, that ate bugs, that ate algae is what? What? What kind of a producer or consumer? Tertiary consumer, that's correct, okay? But to avoid making a mistake, since I let you guys write on your test, I would go ahead and label out each of those different trophic levels to get your answer, okay? So let me just kind of write this on the board really quick. So we have a bear, and it's eating a fish, right? And then that fish had eaten bugs, and those bugs had eaten algae, okay? And we want to know what this bear is. What trophic level is the bear feeding on? So let's go step by step, starting from the beginning. So the algae is what? The algae represents what? The producer. The algae is the producer, okay? And then the bugs, since they're eating the producer, are called what?
Primary.
A primary consumer. PC, primary consumer. The fish would then be a secondary consumer. And then that gives you the answer that the bear is a tertiary consumer. Okay, tertiary is spelled like this. Tertiary consumer. And that's what we were looking for. Tertiary consumer. See, it helps to label it out, I think, instead of just trying to hide it out. We might as well. That's how I would answer these questions, even if I was given them on a test. I'd always make sure I labeled it out. Okay. What about the next example? A person who eats a chicken that ate grain is going to be a secondary consumer. So let's see how we got that. So the person is eating chicken, and that chicken had eaten grain. So the grain is what? Is the producer. Okay? The chicken is what?
Consumer.
What kind of consumer? What? It's eating the producer, so the primary consumer, right? Okay? And then that makes the person a secondary consumer. called the producer or the primary producer. There's only one kind of producer,
What comes after the tertiary?
quaternary.
Quaternary.
Quaternary, yeah. So like if the human was to eat the bear, okay, and I guess sometimes humans could eat bear meat,
What about the kids?
then they'd be the quaternary consumer.
Let's see the bear
What?
die and will be the decomposer. So which is
But they're not called, they're just called decomposers. They're not called quaternary consumers. Okay, eventually everything dies and is broken down by the decomposer. They're not called quaternary consumers. It's a different type of a heterotroph. Okay, and then the last one is if a person eats a vegetable, that person is feeding as what? Right, the vegetable is the producer, right? Veggie is the producer, and so if the person is eating the vegetable, what does that make the person? Yeah, primary consumer. Okay, primary consumer. Does that make sense, guys? Good with those food chain questions? Okay, so the next question is just a simple fill in the blank. And so what is this term for how pesticides, heavy metals, and other chemicals or pollutants which accumulate in increasing concentrations in the living tissues of consumers in the food chain by what process? What's this process called? It starts with bio. Don't confuse it with bioremediation. That is fine. Huh? So it's increasing in concentration, so it's becoming magnified as you go to the higher and higher trophic levels. Biomagnification. Good. You can call it biomagnification or biological magnification. They both mean the same thing. Bio or biological magnification. That's not a good thing. That's the reason why pregnant women, for example, are not supposed to eat certain types of seafood, because a lot of the seafood that we eat, like tuna or swordfish, for example, feed at high trophic levels. Okay, so we're on the back of the last page here. So the greatest threat to biodiversity, guys, what's the greatest threat? If you lose this, you're going to lose diversity as a whole. What is it? What's the biggest threat to biodiversity? How about loss of habitat, right? Habitat loss or deforestation, those words are really synonymous with each other. If you lose the habitat, you lose the forest, you're going to lose all the species associated with that habitat. So that's definitely the biggest threat to biodiversity. What are some other threats? Think about it. Some things we've talked about. What are some other threats to biodiversity? Some of them you've had discussions about. You know,
Climate change.
okay, yeah, climate change. Definitely, we're going to talk more about that. That works. You guys had done a discussion, an online discussion on different types of these also that disrupt and destroy ecosystems. You remember what I'm talking about? Invasive species, right? How about invasive exotic species? Right? Burmese pythons in the Everglades competing with our native top-level predator, the alligator. Okay, or Brazilian pepper taking over vegetation and crowding out native vegetation. You know, you could also say pollution, right? Overexploitation. There's a whole slide of these different types of threats, and it was definitely highlighted that habitat loss was the biggest threat. number 19. So we're talking about these biogeochemical cycles. That's some of the more complex stuff that we go over in this class. So let's definitely review this. And I'll have some more questions about that in the other worksheet we're going to do shortly. So we've got carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus to talk about. These are the three biogeochemical cycles you got to be responsible for understanding. You got to know the main abiotic reservoir for them, and also the human impacts. How are humans impacting these natural cycles? So where in the abiotic environment is carbon mostly found? Where does it start off in the carbon cycle? In the air. Yep, in the form of carbon dioxide. Air. Okay? And then the plants that perform photosynthesis absorb the carbon from the air. They transform it into molecules of sugar that then pass to the consumers who eat the plants, right? And then eventually the consumers, like us, we exhale because we broke down that sugar and we exhale carbon dioxide back into the air. So the carbon dioxide completely recycles through this process, okay? What are some human activities that create excess carbon in the atmosphere? There are two major things. They're both things that have increased dramatically since the Industrial Revolution. So how about the burning of fossil fuels, right? Burning of wood and fossil fuels for energy use. Wood and fossil fuels are all carbon-based. And so when you burn it, it produces a ton of excess carbon dioxide. Huh? Yeah, which is a type of greenhouse gas. And then another one is deforestation. Because if we're chopping down trees, then we have less trees to take out the carbon dioxide from the air to start with, right? So those are the two major ways that humans have impacted the carbon cycle. And a major symptom of an upset carbon cycle is climate change, right? That's the symptom that we've upset this cycle, climate change, increasing temperatures. The nitrogen cycle is a very complex cycle. It has many different steps. Most of them are performed by specialized types of bacteria. Do you guys remember where in the abiotic world nitrogen is mostly found? Okay, how much of the atmosphere is nitrogen? You guys already learned that back in Unit 2. 78%. There's a huge amount of nitrogen in the air. And because of the very first step of the nitrogen cycle, called nitrogen fixation, there's also a whole lot of nitrogen in the soil. Okay, so there's actually two major reservoirs for nitrogen, but it really does start off in the air. Okay. Now, one of the major ways we've upset the nitrogen cycle is also by burning fossil fuels. Burning fossil fuels releases nitrogen oxides. So that's excess nitrogen getting into the atmosphere than should. Okay? And a major symptom of this release of nitrogen oxides in the air is climate change and also acid rain. Nitrogen oxides are also greenhouse gases. You guys have heard about acid rain before, right? Well, one of the major causes of that is having too much nitrogen oxides and other pollutants in the air. Okay. Now, nitrogens are also added to fertilizers. So anywhere where we use a lot of fertilizers, we also have nitrogen runoff into water, which can also be a cause of eutrophication. Okay? So another thing that's very different from the previous example is fertilizer use and runoff land in rock, right? In rocks. Okay? And the phosphorus enters the environment when rock is exposed to weathering factors, right? Moving wind and water. It then enters the water or soil where it is absorbed by producers because they use it to help them grow. And they pass it on to the consumers, right? And then when the consumers die, then the phosphorus gets released back into the environment by the decomposers, okay? And eventually some of that phosphorus can settle back down, back into rock over time, okay? So by that process, the phosphorus goes full circle. And so the major ways in which we upset this, definitely burning of fossil fuels and stuff does not do that because there's no atmospheric component to phosphorus. But something that we did talk about before applies to the phosphorus cycle. So any activity that increases the rate of runoff is going to increase the amount of phosphorus in the environment. So what did we talk about that was just today, that was a concept from Unit 6 that exposes the land to more erosion and runoff? What kind of activity? Right, how do we get minerals out of the ground? Mining, yeah. So mining and runoff from a mine, okay? That's going to cause excess phosphorus to get into the environment, right? And then you also have fertilizer use and runoff because phosphorus is very heavily put in fertilizers just like nitrogen is. So a symptom of an upset phosphorus cycle is that magic word, eutrophication, right? Eutrophication because of all of the runoff coming from mines and farms, anything where there's phosphorus that is now more free to enter into aquatic systems. Okay, does that make sense, guys? Okay. All right, so now we've got these population growth models to differentiate. Right, that's the next question, logistic versus exponential growth. Okay. Differentiate between logistic and exponential growth, question number 20. Okay. Logistic versus exponential. Okay. So let me ask you this question. Which of these growth patterns is how the human population has been growing since the Industrial Revolution? Which one? Logistic? Have we been growing logistically or exponentially? Exponentially. Okay? And what is the shape of that growth curve? How do you describe it? A J-shaped curve. You got the J-shaped curve of exponential growth. Okay? So this is basically growth without limits. Growth without limits. You have a constant doubling and doubling and doubling of populations. It looks like there's nothing constraining how this population can grow. Okay? That's exponential growth represented by a J-shaped curve. Logistic growth is represented by what shaped curve? How is it described? Remember logistic growth? How do you describe that? What shape? What's the letter that describes the shape? Looks like this, right? And we call that the S-shaped curve. This is growth with limits, right? There are limiting factors. Limiting factors such as food, water, habitat space. Okay, limiting factors are restricting population growth. Okay? The population is only able to grow up to this point. What do we call this? See how the population flatlines right here? What do we call that? Remember that word, that term? carrying capacity. Remember that? Okay. Population grows and stabilizes at carrying capacity. That's important. The carrying capacity of the environment applies to logistic growth. It does not apply to exponential. Okay? The logistic growth model takes into account the carrying capacity. What is the maximum number of individuals that can be supported by the resources in that area? Okay? All right. What is the limiting factors? What's the food availability, the water availability, the habitat, shelter availability? Okay.
What about the diseases?
Diseases as well. Diseases would be a density-dependent factor, definitely, that would also cause perhaps a logistic growth model, certainly. Okay, and then the next question is about succession. So succession, ecological succession is a process of change where, a piece of land, increases in biological diversity starting with the plant community, okay, over time. And there's two different types. There's primary succession and secondary succession. Primary succession takes a very long time. And that's because you're not starting with anything. You're not even starting with soil. You're just starting with bare rock. Okay? Starts with bare rock. No soil. So the first thing that has to happen is that pioneer communities, such as lichens, need to move in and colonize the rock, and then over time the lichens break down the rock and make soil. Okay? So pioneer communities of organisms, like lichens, move in and make soil. That's the key. We've got to make soil here, so it takes a long time. This can take thousands and thousands of years. Okay. Once the soil has been made, then grasses and wildflowers can start to grow, and then bigger plants like shrubs can start to grow, and then you'll have little tree seedlings, and then eventually small trees, and then eventually a mature forest. It'll take thousands and thousands of years for this to happen from start to finish. This can happen after a glacier melts. So when a glacier melts, it reveals bare rock underneath. It can also happen if a volcano erupts and then covers a landscape with lava, which then burns and melts all the vegetation and soil, and then covers everything with eventually igneous rock, right? Okay? So as long as you're just starting with bare rock, it's the process called primary succession. Okay? Secondary succession doesn't nearly take as long because what are you starting with? Soil. Okay, starts with soil. And so this can happen after a wildfire. If there's been a wildfire that burned a whole forest, well, all the vegetation is pretty much burned up, but the soil is still there. Okay? So within, a year or so, you're going to have your grasses and your wildflowers come back. Another year, a couple years after that, you'll have some shrubs and then some small trees. And then within a few decades, you'll have trees, and then after 100 years or so, you'll have a mature forest once more. So this doesn't nearly take as much time because you're starting with the soil. Okay? Takes 100, hundreds of years to go from start to finish, not thousands of years. Okay? This could also happen if like there's a piece of farmland or a mine that people abandoned because it was no longer useful anymore. Well, what's going to happen? The land is going to be let go and secondary succession will take place and it will eventually become habitat again. Okay, the soil is still intact. You guys have any questions on that? Okay, well then the last question on this in this packet then is about interspecific interactions. So there were a bunch of them that we talked about in class, but let's talk about just 3 examples and some examples of those. So what are some examples of interspecific interactions? Right? You guys remember? What's the type of reaction, interspecific interaction where both species benefit? What's that called? What's that? It starts with an M. When both species benefit, what do you call that? What?
Mutualism.
Mutualism, yeah, mutualism. Mutualism, and that's a plus-plus relationship. Both species benefit. What was an example that we talked about, or even an example that you could think of that would work for mutualism? Both species benefit. One of the examples we talked about is the corals in the zooxanthellae. Right? Remember the zooxanthellae, they live within the tissue of the corals and they do photosynthesis, providing the corals with sugar to eat. Okay? And then the zooxanthellae benefit because they have a place to live in the coral where they have access to sun. That's all that they need. So they both benefit from that relationship. Other ones are clownfish and anemones, right? They both benefit from that relationship. How about bees and flowers? That's a mutualism. The pollinators, like bees, they benefit because they get food from flowers to make honey. And the flowers benefit because they have increased reproductive success. When the bees land on different flowers, they actually drop a little bit of pollen here and there, fertilizing the flower. Okay? What else? What are some other interspecific interactions? What is it? When the one benefits and the other doesn't. Okay, so there's a couple of those. So there was predation is like that, and herbivory is like that, and parasitism is like this. There's a lot of different examples where one benefits and the other does not. So let's put up predation. Okay? Predation, right? One benefits, the other is harmed. Okay? Predator eats prey. Predator obviously benefits, it gets food, prey is dead. Got eaten. Okay? What's an example of that? Anybody can give me an example of predation. Come on, guys. Let's proceed. Give me an example of predation. You can do it. Come on.
A lion eats something.
Yeah, what is it? Okay, well, a lion eats what?
Giraffe.
A lion eats a giraffe. There you go. Lion eats giraffe. Okay, how about you eat steak? That's predation. You didn't kill it, somebody else killed it for you, but you're still being a predator. Okay, human eats steak. Lion eats giraffe. Simple, predation. What else? What is it?
Is that what?
Okay, parasitism. Yeah. So that's an example of parasitism. That's where one species benefits and the other is harmed, right? And so parasite benefits and the host species is harmed. So we talk about brood parasites where cuckoos benefit and bluebirds are a common host for this, so we can talk about them as the host. birds are the host. What about a more simple example of parasitism, right? Like what do we pay for to get rid of on dogs and cats all the time? Yeah, ticks and fleas, right? So ticks and cats, right, or dogs. How about, what are some parasites on humans that can be inside of us? Tapeworms, yeah, tapeworms in humans. There's a lot of different kinds of parasitic relationships, okay? And there was other ones, guys, too. So herbivory, which is a special kind of predation where, you know, an animal eats a plant. There was also competition, where both species lose out. It's a negative-negative, right? They both can't fulfill their growth potential. And there was also commensalism, where one species benefits but the other is unaffected. Okay, so there's a bunch of different examples of interspecific interactions we talked about. Okay, so we're done with that worksheet. So now we're going to go through the other ones that were different sort of activity worksheets from Unit 4. Let's go over, which one? Which one do you want to do first? The big one? The 2-pager or the 1-pager? I guess it doesn't matter who's wrong. Okay? Let's go over the 1-pager for now. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about biomes. Let's do this one with the matching activity on biomes. Okay, I'm not going to write this on the board, but we're going to go through the answers. Okay? We haven't really talked about biomes yet.
This is Unit 4.
Yep. All of these other worksheets that are separate are from Unit 4. Unit 4 was a mega unit, so I have lots of resources on that. Okay? So matching the correct biomes. So let's hear you guys' answers. Number 1, the most complex and diverse biome. What do you think? Tropical rainforest, right? Letter H, tropical rainforest. How about number 2, the ground is permanently frozen. Where would the ground be permanently frozen? The tundra. That's right. So letter A for number 2. Ground is permanently frozen. You've got the right one. It's just on the back of that. Oh, there it is. Okay. Number 3, trees that shed leaves, such as maple and oak.
Temperate. Would that be a temperate rainforest or temperate glass?
It would be temperate, but neither of those. Deciduous. That word deciduous means shed, means it will shed leaves. So temperate deciduous forest, letter E for number 3. Number 4, Mediterranean climate, periodic fires. Which one of those biomes is very fire adaptive? The chaparral, letter C. Number 4 is letter C.
I remember that one because I'm from there.
Okay, there you go. Number 5, fir, pine, and other cone-bearing trees are the only dominant tree in this biome. What is it? Fir, pine, and other cone-bearing trees. It's the really big biome. How about the taiga, which is the boreal forest? Letter D. Letter D for number 5. You guys will all get this next one, I think. Number 6, home of lions, zebra, and gazelle. Which one's that? Savannah. Yeah, letter I. Letter I, Savannah. Number 7, the North American plains. What do we call that? No, not tundra. This is like America's breadbasket. The plains. Plains means, yeah, grassland. So this is temperate grassland. Letter F for number 7. Number 8, produces a third of the oxygen on Earth because it's huge and it's full of evergreen trees. That's going to be the taiga, again, the boreal forest, letter D for number 8. Number 9, receives the least input of solar radiation. That's why it's so cold here. What's that going to be? The tundra, yeah, letter A. Number 9 biome? We are in a temperate biome,
Grassland?
not grassland. Look at all the trees we got. And if you look at the trees outside, you can see that they've had their leaves change colors. They've dropped their leaves, huh? Temperate deciduous. Here in Florida and the whole eastern side of North America, in fact, is a temperate deciduous forest biome. Letter E. Number 11. Number 12, home to American bison. They like to roam plains and grasslands, right? In the interiors of continents. Where's those American bison? Buffalo. Bison is the real word for buffalo. That's going to be temperate grassland. Letter F for number 12. Number 13, where do plants and animals have to have special adaptations for water conservation? The desert. Yep, letter B for number 13. Number 14, most animals are found in the canopy.
Rainforest.
The rainforest, tropical rainforest, letter H. Letter H for number 14. Number 15, grasslands with scattered trees. Grasslands with trees every here and there, but not big forests. You might find a leopard in one of those trees, looking at some nice tasty warthogs. Huh? Savannah. Letter I, right? Think Africa. Savannah. Number 16, dominated by trees with thin needle-like leaves. That's going to be the same as the ones that are fir pine and cone bearing that we talked about before. Okay, the taiga, the boreal forest, letter D. Letter D for number 16. Number 17, there are two answers that could work here. Occur in Alaska, Russia, Scandinavia, and Canada. So we're talking about really far north latitudes. What two biomes can be found there? Tundra and? What's just below the tundra? The taiga. Okay, tundra and taiga. Letters A and D would both work for number 17. Number 18, what's the driest region on Earth? You guys can all tell me that. Yeah, desert. Deserts are the driest. Letter B for number 18. Number 19, fertile soil, mostly in the interior of continents. This is what we call America's breadbasket because of that fertile soil. We do a lot of agriculture here. In fact, most of it has been converted to agricultural lands. This is the temperate grassland, letter F. Temperate grassland. And then number 20, ancient nutrient-poor soils, because most of the nutrients are all absorbed and captured by the biotic organisms. What's that going to be? There's so much life here that it sucks it all out of the soil. Which biome is full of life? Because there's so much moisture and warmth. Tropical rainforest, letter H. Number 20, letter H.
What's about the one and two is that?
Huh?
One's number 1 and 2.
Number 1 and 2. Number 1 was tropical rainforest, letter H, and number 2 was tundra, letter A. Anybody need another one of those repeated? All right, let's do some of these multiple choice questions here. All right, so number 1, you guys should all be able to answer this. We just went over it not too long ago. Number 1, which category consists of only one species? Population. Good. Population, letter C. Number 2, what's true about a biome? It's not found in only one geographic area. It really does not have distinct boundaries. Is it characterized by the plants that grow there? Think about how we just differentiated a lot of these biomes, right? Grassland with scattered trees, trees with thin needle-like leaves, trees that have cones, okay? So a lot of how we differentiate biomes is based on the plants that grow there, right? So letter C is going to be the answer for number 2. A biome is characterized by the plants that grow there. Number 3, autotrophs are essential components of an ecosystem because they are what? They definitely are not consumers. They can't be. Only heterotrophs are consumers.
D.
Yeah, letter D. They are the primary producers. They are producers, right? Autotrophs are the things that do photosynthesis. They are the producers. So number 3 is letter D. Number 4, in a food chain. What's true about a food chain? Number A can't be right because there's actually less organisms that at the higher levels. Okay, food chains definitely have to include plants, so letter C can't be right.
That's a B.
Yeah, it is B. In a food chain, it's letter B. Each level contains only about 10% of the energy present in the previous level, right? Remember that because energy does not recycle. Energy flows in a one-way direction and gets degraded as it moves through all the trophic levels. Only 10% from the previous level passes on to the next. Number 5, how does a food web differ from a food chain? The benefit of a food web is that it can show you omnivorous relationships, right? It can show you how one organism can be a primary consumer or a secondary consumer depending on what it eats, right? So letter A is looking pretty good, right? Okay, so number 5 is letter A. A food web can illustrate how one organism can depend on several sources of food for energy. Definitely letter A for number 5. Number 6, which process of the carbon cycle decreases the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? So what process takes carbon out of the atmosphere? It's the only one of these that takes it out. Well, combustion puts it in, right? Burning of fossil fuels and wood is combustion. That adds carbon. Decomposition also adds carbon. Respiration, that's what we're doing right now. When we breathe out, that's more carbon back into the atmosphere. So the only thing that takes it out is photosynthesis, letter D. Right, the trees and the plants.
Deforestation is
Deforestation reduces photosynthesis, and that's how CO2 eventually goes up. So photosynthesis is necessary to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So number 6 is letter D. All right, and then the number 7, I just have it omitted because there's just not like a very clear way to write this answer, but basically it's because there's just not enough energy left. There's not enough energy left because of how only 10% passes on that we talked about in number 4. Okay, there's not any more energy left to support any more trophic levels. Number 8, I like this question. I sometimes like to have this as an extra credit question. Okay, we've already even talked about this a little bit in the previous worksheet. But number 8, explain 2 ways that the burning of vegetation, such as trees, affects carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. Okay, what are we going to have there? Come on, guys. So combustion of wood does what? Does it release carbon dioxide or decrease it? It releases, okay? So combustion, burning plants, trees, releases excess CO2, all right? So that's one way. What's the other way? You just mentioned it. With the deforestation, so how does that relate? So deforestation.
Decrease the carbon dioxide.
Deforestation reduces the amount of plants that can absorb the carbon dioxide, right? So then CO2 goes up. Deforestation removes the carbon dioxide absorbers, right? The plants. So that causes CO2 to increase. Right? The plants, if the plants are being chopped down, then they can't do photosynthesis, which is how carbon dioxide gets absorbed. So if less carbon dioxide is being absorbed, then carbon dioxide goes up. Okay, definitely know that one. What is it? Respiration takes in oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. We don't breathe in carbon dioxide, we breathe in the oxygen.
Yeah, I know, we intake.
We intake oxygen and we release carbon dioxide. So we add carbon
Yeah,
dioxide.
that's why I said, what about the respiration? It gives more.
But this is two ways of the burning of vegetation. That's what the question is asking. How does getting rid of vegetation and burning it affect CO2 levels? So if we're chopping it down to burn it, then we have less photosynthesis going on. And by burning it alone, that releases CO2. Okay, that makes sense? All right, guys, so let's go through these questions real quick here. So autotrophs versus heterotrophs. So you guys know that at this point that autotrophs are what? Autotrophs are what kind of organisms? Are they plants or animals? They're plants, right? So number one, so we're starting off here. Okay, you guys all have this one? Description? This is the last worksheet that we're doing. Okay. Number one, maple tree. What is that? Autotroph or heterotroph? A maple tree. An autotroph, right? So you can write A or autotroph on that line. What about number two, human? Give me A or H, autotroph or heterotroph? H, heterotroph. Number three, wheat. Wheat is what? Plant, right? So wheat is an autotroph, A. Number four, fungi. Fungi is molds, mushrooms, and yeast. They don't do photosynthesis. So they are heterotrophs, H. Number five, an amoeba. An amoeba you probably don't know too much about, but an amoeba is a single-celled organism that feeds by engulfing its prey. So like this is an amoeba, here's its nucleus, and it's eating a little paramecium. Okay, so what is it? An autotroph or a heterotroph? It's a what? A heterotroph, H. It does not do photosynthesis. Okay, H, heterotroph. Number six, green algae. Green algae, what's that? A or H? What? Algae? Autotroph, right? Algae is a plant-like organism. Autotroph, A. Number seven, a housefly. A fly. H, heterotroph. Number eight is a fern. A fern. That's an autotroph, you're right. Fern is a plant, an autotroph. Number nine, a dandelion is a flower. What is that? The flower? Autotroph. A, autotroph.
I think only
Huh?
the plants does photosynthesis.
As long as it does photosynthesis, it's an autotroph.
I mean, whatever relates to trees, the only one thing process the photosynthesis.
Well, it's not just, it's trees and grass and flowers and shrubs, all of those things do photosynthesis. Anything that's a plant, like.
That's what I was trying to say. I'm not trying to specifically trees, grass.
Yeah, it's not just trees, it's any sort of a plant. Grass, flowers, shrubs, all of it. Algae. Number 10, goldfish. What's a goldfish? Heterotroph, letter H. Number 11, grass. Autotroph, right? A. And number 12, a cow is a heterotroph. Add a number 13 there and write B. B-E, right? Like a bumblebee. What's that? It's a heterotroph, exactly, right? Some people get confused because they think, oh, well, bees make honey, so they make their own food, but they don't perform photosynthesis. They have to get pollen from flowers that they feed on to make that honey, so they're definitely heterotrophs. Bees are heterotrophs. Okay, fill in the blank here. Number 6, a group of independent organisms, and I'll definitely always say different species in a particular environment is what? The group of independent organisms of different species in a particular environment is what? What is it? Community. You're right, community. Right, number 6 there is community. Number 7, organisms that break down complex compounds in dead tissue are decomposers. Decomposers for number 7. Number 8, all the living and non-living things in an area form a. We already talked about this. Ecosystem. Good. Number 9, the particular environment to which a particular species is adapted is its what? Particular environment to which a particular species is adapted to. Habitat. Habitat. Number 10, the special role and place of an organism within its habitat is its what? Niche. That's right, niche. Niche. Number 11, an animal that eats both plants and animals is a omnivore. Good. Number 12, members of a single species that occupy a common area form a single species, guys, remember that? Population. Population for number 12. And number 13, animals that feed only on dead organisms are scavengers. Perfect. Like vultures, right? Okay, some carbon cycle questions. We've talked about this a little bit so far. So take a look at those arrows there in that diagram. Identify the 3 processes that release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. What are they? What are the 3 processes that are adding CO2 into the atmosphere? What is it, guys? Look at the arrows. Combustion. What else? Cellular respiration, right? Right, we exhale carbon dioxide and then death and decomposition. So there's a lot of things that add CO2 into the atmosphere. Number 2, what's the only process that removes carbon dioxide? What is it? What is it? Photosynthesis. Right. Photosynthesis. Okay. Number 3, what's the human activity, the process that has recently disrupted the balance that once existed in the carbon cycle? We talked about this too, right? What's that human impact that disrupts the carbon cycle? Okay. Which one of those? Cellular respiration and death and decomposition are a natural process, right? So what's the combustion? There you go. Combustion, right? Combustion is a fancy way of saying burning. Okay, burning of wood and fossil fuels for energy use. That's the process that has messed up the carbon cycle. Number 4, here's that same question that we talked about on that last worksheet that, is something that I like to ask as extra credit, right? Explain how the cutting down of trees affects the carbon dioxide cycle. Okay?
Yes, choose more.
Yeah, the answer's right here. We already talked about this, right? If you cut them down, then there's less trees to remove the carbon dioxide, right? Cutting down trees, deforestation, takes away the things that can take CO2 out of the atmosphere, so CO2 goes up, right? And if you burn them, then that releases CO2. So that's obviously important. It came up twice in these worksheets, right? So that's the answer to number 4 right here. And then the answer to number 5, what do plants do with the carbon dioxide they remove from the atmosphere? Do you know that? That's like something we talk a lot about in a biology class. I have mentioned it. The plants absorb the carbon dioxide and then they make what molecule out of it? Sugar. Yeah, glucose. They make sugar, and that sugar is the source back to that sugar produced by plants. Okay, one more worksheet left, guys. Okay. All right, so look at this food chain here. How many links make up this food chain? That's not the number of arrows, but how many organisms make up that food chain? Five, right? There's 5 different creatures in this food chain. Okay? Which organisms or organism are the producers? What's our producer here in this food chain? The algae. Perfect. Which organism will be present in the smallest number? Things that feed at the highest trophic levels are usually found in the smallest number.
The whale.
The whale, right. Killer whale. Number 4, identify the herbivore in the food chain. So what's the thing that's eating the producer? Only the krill, right? Number 5, the carnivore in the food chain, or carnivores. How many carnivores we got there? Who are they? What are our carnivores?
The cod.
Yeah, the cod. Who else?
The cod, the leopard.
Yeah, the seal and the whale. The cod, the seal, and the whale are all carnivores. Number 6. Does this food chain contain any omnivores?
No, we can't tell.
What?
We can't really tell.
That's the exact right answer. We cannot tell. Food chains will not tell us omnivorous relationships. We can't tell from this limited information, right? We can't tell. Only food webs can provide that information. Right? This is a food chain, not a food web. And food chains are limited because they cannot show you omnivorous relationships.
So what if you add the pelican in the list? Can we tell or no?
Well, then it would be a food web of sorts if we add the pelican, but it's not. It's just a food chain, this one. Okay?
I mean, the source of the omnivore, it could be plants and fish.
There could be omnivores here, but we just can't tell from this. It doesn't provide that information. Number 7, what would happen to the krill population if the number of cod were significantly decreased because of fishing? What would happen to the krill? If cod went down, what would happen to krill?
They will increase.
They would increase, right? So the krill would increase because there's less predator to eat them. Would the decrease in the cod population affect algae populations?
Yeah.
Yes, why?
Because they'll have more quill. And
That's right, because now there's more krill that are eating the algae. Okay? Yes, because the increased krill will eat more algae. And then number 9, explain how a decrease in the cod population would affect higher levels of the food chain. What would happen to the top? What would first go down in population size because there's less cod to eat? The leopard. The seal, right? The leopard seal. So first, the seal would go down, and because there's less seals to eat, what would then go down? Then the whales would go down. Okay, so you can see that every link in a food chain is very important, right? If one of them were removed or were reduced, it's going to have effects at the bottom of the food chain and also at the top. Right? Can you guys see that from that example? Good. Okay. Last page, some food chain questions, and then we're done. So number 1, a heterotroph, what's true? Is a heterotroph definitely a primary consumer, a heterotroph, and an herbivore. So letter D, all of the above. Number 3, if a person eats a vegetable, here's that question again, the person is acting as a primary consumer. Letter B, primary consumer. Number 4, if a person eats a steak, which is from a cow, the person is acting as a secondary consumer. Perfect. Letter C for number 4. Number 5, if a person eats a salmon that had eaten smaller fish that ate algae, that person is acting as a tertiary consumer. Letter D. Right? The algae is the producer, the small fish is the primary consumer, the salmon is the secondary consumer, and that makes the person a tertiary consumer. Letter D. Number 6, a top predator. What's true? Has no natural enemies, is a meat eater, is a heterotroph. Yeah, D, all the above. A top predator is all the above. Letter D. Number 7, a detritivore. A detrivore, a scavenger, is another word for detrivore. What's true? Yeah, a detritivore eats decomposing matter. Letter B. Feeds on dead stuff. Number 8, as nutritional energy passes through the food chain, energy. What? What happens? It's lost, right? Letter A, right? Only 10% passes on to each level from the previous. Definitely is lost. Letter A for number 8. Number 9, there are more primary producers than there are. Yeah, you can say all of the above. You could really say primary consumers, or you could say all of the above. There's definitely more producers than anything else. The things that are at the very bottom of the food chain are the most numerous on Earth. Okay? All the above. Number 9. And number 10, there are more tertiary consumers than there are quaternary consumers. Letter D. Okay, perfect. We're done. We went through a lot of material, right? You guys have your study guides already?
Can you go back to
Okay, so we're done. So if you guys don't have any questions, we can wrap up. Otherwise, I'll take questions.
actually said the D as actually number 8.
Number 8. In the back here, as nutritional energy passes through the food chain, energy is lost, right? Yeah, so remember the pyramid of energy flow? There's a slide on this in your PowerPoint, but it talks about how, there's a lot of energy, like the sun's energy is captured by the plant, right? And so there's a huge amount of energy at the producer level captured from the sunlight. They transform it into sugar. And then the amount of energy is gradually being lost. So from the producer to the primary consumer level, only some of the energy passes on, and then from primary consumer to secondary consumer, only some energy passes on, and then so on and so forth up your trophic levels, okay? Because with each passage, with each passage to each trophic level, a lot of energy is being released in the form of heat, okay? A lot of energy is just being degraded into heat with each transfer, okay? There's a slide on this. So only 10% of the energy that's in this level is passing on to this level. And then only 10% of the energy here is passing on here. Because the 90% of the energy that's not passing on is being converted to heat. Okay? So, think about it. When you are working out, right, you're burning a whole lot of sugar. You're burning a whole lot of the energy storage in your body. And so you feel hot, right? And you need to drink water to cool down because of all that heat that's being produced and released. Okay? So that's why energy is lost as it goes up and up and up through the different trophic levels. Does that make sense?
Yeah.